Some criminals hide in caves, others hide in plain sight, and somehow it works. Stay with this one, because every story gets more frustrating, stranger, and harder to believe. 1. Whitey Bulger, the mob boss who became America's worst neighbor. James Whitey Bulger was not some mystery man in a trench coat. He was a violent Boston mob boss, the former leader of the Winter Hill Gang, and he was wanted in connection with serious crimes including murder, extortion, and racketeering. Then, in late 1994, right before he was about to be indicted, he vanished. For 16 years, the FBI searched for him while Bulger lived under fake names with his longtime companion, Catherine Greig. The ridiculous part? He was finally found not in a bunker, not on a yacht, not in some villain cave, but in Santa Monica, California, living in an apartment like a retired uncle who complains about parking. The break came after a media campaign focused on Greig, hoping someone would recognize her. Someone did. Bulger was arrested in 2011, proving that sometimes the FBI does not need lasers, just a good TV spot and one nosy citizen. 2. Eric Rudolph, the bomber who hid in the mountains for 5 years. Eric Rudolph became one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives after a series of bombings between 1996 and 1998, including the Centennial Olympic Park bombing in Atlanta. The attacks killed 2 people and injured many others. Then Rudolph disappeared into the mountains of western North Carolina, where he managed to survive for years like a criminal version of a camping magazine nobody asked for. The FBI believed he knew the area well, and according to the Bureau, he hid in forests, caves, campsites, and possibly empty cabins. Hundreds searched, but Rudolph kept slipping away. And after all that effort, all those task forces, all that manpower, he was finally caught in 2003 by a local police officer while rummaging through a trash bin behind a rural grocery store. 5 years of hiding ended because dinner plans apparently involved dumpster cuisine. That is not a dramatic finale. That is nature's worst checkout lane. 3. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, caught by his own writing style. Ted Kaczynski, known as the Unabomber, terrified America for nearly 2 decades. Starting in 1978, he mailed or delivered homemade bombs that killed 3 people and injured nearly 2 dozen. The FBI had a nightmare case: random-looking targets, almost no forensic evidence, and a suspect who lived quietly in a tiny Montana cabin while building bombs from ordinary scrap materials. Investigators chased theories for years. They studied victims, bomb parts, geography, handwriting, basically everything except asking, "Does anyone's weird brother write like this?" Then came the big mistake. Kaczynski demanded that his 35,000-word manifesto be published. Once it appeared, his brother David recognized the writing style and contacted authorities. Linguistic analysis connected Ted's letters to the manifesto, and in 1996, the FBI arrested him at his cabin. After 17 years, the case cracked not because of fingerprints, but because the criminal could not resist writing the world's angriest homework assignment. 4. Donald Eugene Webb, the fugitive who stayed hidden until after his death. If there were an award for disappearing completely, Donald Eugene Webb would have been a strong contender. In 1980, Webb shot and killed Police Chief Gregory Adams in Saxonburg, Pennsylvania, during an attempted arrest. Within hours, he vanished. The FBI placed him on its 10 most wanted fugitives list, and investigators chased thousands of leads across the United States and even overseas. Every few months, someone claimed they had spotted him working on a fishing boat, hiding in Mexico, or living under another name. None of it was true. The reality was almost unbelievable. Webb spent years hiding in plain sight at his wife's home in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. The house was searched more than once, yet officers never discovered the carefully concealed hiding space where he reportedly stayed for long periods. His wife remained loyal and helped keep his secret for decades. The mystery finally ended in 2017 when investigators located Webb's remains. He had actually died back in 1999 and had been secretly buried behind the property. Nearly 20 years after his death, one of America's longest-running manhunts came to a quiet end. After all the helicopters, roadblocks, and nationwide searches, the man everyone was looking for had been gone for years. 5. Victor Manuel Gerena, the man who vanished with $7 million. Stealing a few $1,000s is difficult enough. Walking away with more than $7 million and disappearing for decades sounds like something Hollywood would reject for being unrealistic. Yet that's exactly what Victor Manuel Gerena managed to do. In 1983, Gerena worked as a security guard for a Wells Fargo depot in West Hartford, Connecticut. According to investigators, he tied up 2 co-workers, injected them with a sedative, loaded approximately $7 million into a vehicle, and vanished. At the time, it was one of the largest cash robberies in American history. Authorities believed members of the Puerto Rican militant group Los Macheteros helped plan the operation, but Gerena himself was nowhere to be found. The FBI spent decades searching for him. His face appeared on wanted posters, television broadcasts, and eventually the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Tips poured in from around the world, placing him everywhere from Cuba to South America. None led to an arrest. More than 40 years later, Gerena remains one of the FBI's most elusive fugitives. The money has never been fully recovered, and investigators still don't know exactly where he spent most of his years on the run. It's a reminder that even with modern technology, a determined fugitive can sometimes stay one step ahead for an astonishing amount of time. 6. Robert William Fisher, the family murder case that still has no ending. Robert William Fisher wasn't a career criminal or a famous mobster. He appeared to be an ordinary suburban father living in Scottsdale, Arizona. That image shattered in April 2001 when investigators believe Fisher murdered his wife and 2 children before setting the family home on fire in an apparent attempt to destroy the evidence. Before the flames died out, he had already disappeared. The search that followed stretched across deserts, forests, mountains, and even international borders. Fisher was an experienced outdoorsman who enjoyed hunting and camping, leading investigators to believe he could survive for long periods away from civilization. His abandoned SUV was later discovered near Tonto National Forest, fueling speculation that he had escaped into the wilderness. Hundreds of officers searched the rugged terrain, but no trace of him was ever found. Over the years, people have reported seeing Fisher in Canada, Mexico, and several U.S. states. Every promising lead eventually fell apart. In 2021, the FBI removed him from its 10 most wanted list, not because he had been found, but because the investigation had reached a different phase and other fugitives required the limited space. The murder warrant remains active, and authorities continue to believe he could still be alive. Few FBI cases remain as frustratingly unresolved. 7. James Earl Ray, the assassin who nearly escaped forever. After the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis on April 4, 1968, the killer disappeared almost immediately. James Earl Ray had already escaped from a Missouri prison the previous year, and he proved remarkably skilled at creating new identities. Using stolen passports and false names, he traveled through Canada and several European countries, staying just ahead of investigators who were desperately trying to identify his next move. For more than 2 months, authorities pieced together a complicated trail that stretched across continents. Ray constantly changed hotels, altered his appearance, and relied on forged documents. At a time when computers, facial recognition, and digital records didn't exist, tracking a fugitive moving between countries was incredibly difficult. His luck finally ran out at London's Heathrow Airport in June 1968. Immigration officers noticed problems with his Canadian passport while he was attempting to board a flight to Belgium, reportedly hoping to continue toward Africa. They detained him, and investigators quickly confirmed his identity. One of the largest international manhunts of the 20th century ended not with a dramatic shootout, but with careful passport inspection and patient detective work. Sometimes the smallest mistake becomes the one that changes everything. 8. George Machine Gun Kelly, America's most famous gangster, finally runs out of luck. During the early 1930s, George Machine Gun Kelly became one of America's most feared gangsters. Despite the nickname, historians believe he rarely used a machine gun in crimes. His reputation grew mainly through newspaper headlines and clever publicity. Everything changed in 1933 after Kelly and his associates kidnapped wealthy oil man Charles Urschel from his Oklahoma home and demanded a $200,000 ransom, a fortune during the Great Depression. The kidnapping triggered one of the biggest federal investigations of the era. Urschel turned out to be an unusually observant hostage. While blindfolded, he counted his footsteps, listened carefully to trains, noticed aircraft overhead, and remembered details about the property where he was held. Those tiny observations gave investigators valuable clues that narrowed the search. After weeks of tracking ransom money and interviewing witnesses, federal agents located Kelly hiding in Memphis, Tennessee. When officers surrounded the house before dawn, Kelly surrendered without firing a shot. The famous phrase, "Don't shoot, G-men," is widely associated with his arrest, although historians still debate whether he actually said it. Either way, one of America's most notorious criminals discovered that even the most carefully planned escape can be undone by a victim who simply paid attention. 9. Joseph Paul Franklin, the killer who stayed invisible for 6 years. Joseph Paul Franklin spent years drifting across America like a ghost. Unlike criminals who built organizations or relied on large networks, Franklin worked almost entirely alone. Between 1977 and 1980, he carried out a series of racially motivated shootings and murders across several states, making him incredibly difficult to track. Investigators weren't even sure they were hunting one man. Different police departments treated the attacks as separate cases because they happened hundreds of miles apart and often involved different weapons. Franklin constantly changed his appearance. He dyed his hair, grew beards, shaved them off, and traveled under false names. He preferred cheap motels and rarely stayed in one place for long. Every time investigators thought they were getting close, he was already somewhere else. His luck finally ended in 1980 after he was arrested in Kentucky on an unrelated matter. As investigators compared evidence from unsolved murders across multiple states, they realized they had finally found the man responsible. After years of confusion, the scattered pieces suddenly fit together. Franklin's story became one of the earliest examples of how difficult it could be to catch a highly mobile serial offender before modern DNA databases and nationwide digital information sharing. 10. Ralph Bucky Phillips, the fugitive who hid in his own backyard. Most fugitives dream of escaping to another country. Ralph Bucky Phillips proved you could cause just as much trouble without ever leaving Western New York. In 2006, Phillips escaped from prison while serving time for attempted murder. What followed became one of the largest manhunts in New York State history. For nearly 5 months, hundreds of officers searched forests, farms, abandoned buildings, and small rural communities. Residents locked their doors every night, while police helicopters circled overhead. Phillips survived by breaking into hunting cabins, stealing food, clothing, and supplies whenever he needed them. His knowledge of the rugged countryside gave him an enormous advantage over search teams unfamiliar with the terrain. During the manhunt, Phillips shot and seriously wounded 2 state troopers, making his capture an even higher priority. Yet despite all the resources thrown at the search, he repeatedly slipped away. Everything finally ended in September 2006, when 2 alert state troopers spotted him near an old railroad line close to the Pennsylvania border. After months of living like a phantom in the woods, Phillips surrendered peacefully. His capture proved that local knowledge can sometimes frustrate even the largest law enforcement operation, but only for so long. 11. Willie Sutton, the bank robber. Everyone wanted to catch. Long before surveillance cameras watched every bank lobby, Willie Sutton became one of America's most famous bank robbers. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Sutton robbed dozens of banks while using clever disguises that often fooled both employees and police officers. Sometimes he dressed as a maintenance worker. Other times he appeared as a postal employee or even a security guard. His calm personality helped him blend into crowds instead of looking like a desperate criminal. Sutton also became famous for escaping prison. He successfully broke out several times, turning each escape into another newspaper headline. Every successful getaway only added to his legend, frustrating investigators who seemed to catch him just long enough before he disappeared again. The FBI eventually intensified its search, placing Sutton among the nation's most wanted criminals. His run finally ended in 1952 when Brooklyn police received a tip identifying him on a city street. Ironically, one of America's greatest masters of disguise was recognized by someone who simply knew his face. Sometimes years of planning, fake identities, and daring escapes collapse because one observant person happens to be in the right place at exactly the right time. 12. Lester Gillis, Babyface Nelson. Public enemy number 1, Babyface Nelson, looked more like a teenager than one of America's deadliest gangsters. His youthful appearance earned him the nickname, but there was nothing harmless about him. During the early 1930s, Nelson robbed banks across several states and frequently worked alongside notorious criminals, including John Dillinger. The FBI considered him extraordinarily dangerous because he never hesitated to shoot at law enforcement officers. Unlike many criminals who preferred to surrender once surrounded, Nelson often fought until escape became impossible. His constant movement between states made investigations especially difficult in an era when communication between police departments was far slower than it is today. Everything came to a violent conclusion in November 1934 near Barrington, Illinois. FBI agents finally caught up with Nelson after spotting his vehicle on the road. A fierce gun battle followed, leaving 2 federal agents dead and Nelson critically wounded. Although he managed to flee the immediate scene, his injuries were too severe. He died later that evening while hiding with his accomplices. For years, Nelson had outrun authorities through speed, violence, and unpredictability. In the end, however, even America's most dangerous fugitive couldn't outrun his own wounds. 13. Glenn Stewart Godwin, the escape artist who keeps fooling authorities. Some criminals escape once and become legends. Glenn Stewart Godwin somehow made escaping look like a career choice. Convicted of murder in California during the 1980s, Godwin managed to escape from Folsom State Prison in 1987 by climbing through utility tunnels before disappearing into the surrounding countryside. Authorities searched extensively, but never caught him. Instead, investigators later discovered he had fled to Mexico. That should have ended the story. It didn't. While serving time in a Mexican prison years later, Godwin escaped again. This time, officials believed he received outside assistance, allowing him to vanish for a second time. Since then, sightings have surfaced in several countries, but none have led to his arrest. The FBI eventually added him to its 10 most wanted fugitives list because investigators believe he remains involved in international drug trafficking and organized crime. What makes Godwin's story remarkable isn't just one successful escape. It's the fact that after slipping away from 2 different prison systems in 2 different countries, he has continued avoiding capture for decades. Every passing year only makes the mystery more remarkable. 14. Victor Garina's partners almost got caught, but he never did. The Wells Fargo robbery of 1983 became one of the biggest cash thefts in American history, but the investigation turned into something even stranger. Federal agents eventually arrested several members of the Puerto Rican militant organization Los Macheteros, accusing them of helping plan and finance the robbery. Large portions of the stolen money were recovered over time through raids and investigations, yet one man remained missing. Victor Manuel Garina, the Wells Fargo security guard accused of carrying out the robbery itself, simply disappeared. Decades passed while investigators interviewed witnesses, searched properties, and followed leads throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. His associates faced trials, prison sentences, and constant surveillance, but Garina himself never appeared in court. His case became especially frustrating because investigators believed numerous people knew where he had gone but refused to cooperate. Every few years, another rumor surfaced claiming he had died, changed identities, or settled quietly in another country. None could be confirmed. Today, Garina remains one of the FBI's longest-running fugitive investigations, proving that solving most of the puzzle doesn't always mean finding the final missing piece. 15. Brian David Mitchell, the kidnapper, hidden in plain sight. When 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped from her Salt Lake City home in June 2002, the case immediately became national news. The FBI, local police, and thousands of volunteers searched desperately for any sign of her. Investigators followed hundreds of leads, distributed missing person posters across the country, and appeared constantly on television asking for public assistance. The shocking part is that Brian David Mitchell, the man responsible for the kidnapping, never fled overseas or built a secret underground hideout. Instead, he remained surprisingly close to the area, traveling openly with Elizabeth and his wife while presenting themselves as a small religious group. Mitchell relied on disguises, altered appearances, and psychological control rather than sophisticated escape plans. For 9 months, they moved through public places where people occasionally noticed them, but failed to recognize the missing teenager beneath heavy clothing and changed hair. Finally, in March 2003, alert witnesses contacted police after recognizing Mitchell from television coverage. Officers quickly confirmed Elizabeth's identity and rescued her safely. The case remains one of the clearest reminders that sometimes the biggest breakthrough comes not from advanced technology, but from ordinary citizens who simply pay attention. 16. George Metesky, the mad bomber who was found through profiling. For 16 years, New York City lived with a mystery. Beginning in 1940, homemade bombs started appearing in theaters, train stations, libraries, and office buildings. Some exploded, others were discovered before they could cause harm. The bomber almost always left the devices in public places, making millions of people wonder where the next one would appear. Police chased countless leads, but the person responsible seemed to disappear after every attack. The breakthrough came from an unusual source. Psychiatrist Dr. James Brussel studied the bombings and created one of the first criminal profiles in American history. He predicted that the suspect would likely be a middle-aged, unmarried man of Eastern European background who held a grudge against Consolidated Edison. Even more surprisingly, he suggested the suspect would be wearing a double-breasted suit when arrested. Investigators eventually focused on former Con Edison employee George Metesky. When officers arrived at his home in Connecticut in 1957, Metesky calmly opened the door wearing a buttoned double-breasted suit just as Brussel had predicted. After nearly 2 decades of fear, one of America's longest investigations ended thanks to careful behavioral analysis rather than fingerprints or dramatic chases. 17. Thomas James Holden, the first FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitive. When the FBI introduced its 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list in 1950, the very first name was Thomas James Holden. He wasn't a celebrity gangster or a notorious bank robber. He was wanted for murdering his wife, her brother, and later another man while trying to avoid capture. After those killings, Holden disappeared, beginning a manhunt that stretched across the country. For more than a year, investigators followed reports from nearly every corner of the United States. Witnesses claimed they had seen him working odd jobs, living under false names, or traveling through small towns where nobody asked too many questions. Each tip looked promising until officers arrived and discovered someone else entirely. The search finally ended in June 1951 in Beaverton, Oregon. Holden had quietly found work and blended into the local community, hoping that time would erase his identity. Instead, an alert citizen recognized him from newspaper photographs and contacted authorities. FBI agents arrested him without a shootout or dramatic chase. The very first fugitive placed on the Bureau's famous list was captured because an ordinary person paid attention and made one phone call. 18. Christopher Boyce, the spy who escaped prison. Christopher Boyce wasn't hiding from the FBI because of bank robberies or organized crime. He had been convicted of spying for the Soviet Union after passing classified American intelligence information during the Cold War. In 1980, while serving a lengthy federal sentence, Boyce escaped from prison in California by climbing over the perimeter fence. Instead of immediately fleeing overseas, he spent months robbing banks across the Pacific Northwest to finance his life on the run. Boyce adopted fake identities, changed his appearance, and stayed constantly on the move. Authorities searched several states, believing he might eventually try to leave the country, but he kept surprising investigators by remaining in the United States. His freedom lasted about 19 months before it ended in 1981. A routine traffic stop in Washington state raised suspicions, and officers eventually confirmed they had found one of America's most famous escaped prisoners. Boyce later admitted that constantly changing identities and avoiding recognition was exhausting. Escaping prison had been easier than staying hidden. His case remains one of the most unusual combinations of espionage, prison escape, and old-fashioned bank robbery in FBI history. 19. Robert Vesco, the financier who escaped justice for decades. Not every FBI fugitive carried a gun. Robert Vesco wore expensive suits, flew on private jets, and moved millions of dollars instead of robbing banks. During the early 1970s, the wealthy financier faced accusations involving massive securities fraud and financial crimes. Before authorities could bring him to trial, Vesco quietly left the United States. From there, he spent decades moving between countries that refused to extradite him. He lived in Costa Rica, the Bahamas, Nicaragua, and eventually Cuba, often surrounded by luxury despite being one of America's most wanted white-collar fugitives. Every time investigators thought diplomatic pressure might finally bring him back, another political change or legal obstacle kept him beyond their reach. Unlike many fugitives who survived by hiding in cabins or abandoned buildings, Vesco stayed in large homes and reportedly continued doing business while remaining outside American jurisdiction. He was never returned to stand trial in the United States. Instead, he died in Cuba in 2007 after spending more than 30 years successfully avoiding American prosecutors. His story showed that money, international politics, and friendly governments could sometimes be just as effective as disappearing into the wilderness. 20. James Whitey Bulger's secret weapon was normality. When people imagine one of America's most wanted criminals, they picture fake passports, disguises, and constant movement. Whitey Bulger proved there was another strategy: become completely ordinary. After fleeing Boston in 1994, the former mob boss settled in a modest apartment in Santa Monica, California, with Catherine Gregg. He rarely traveled, didn't flash expensive jewelry, and avoided drawing attention to himself. Neighbors remembered him as a polite older man who enjoyed walking on the beach and arguing about everyday neighborhood issues. Nobody suspected that the quiet retiree living next door had once led one of Boston's most violent criminal organizations. For 16 years, investigators searched around the world while Bulger stayed remarkably close to millions of people going about their daily lives. His apartment reportedly contained more than $800,000 in cash and dozens of hidden firearms, all concealed behind the appearance of a peaceful retirement. His remarkable run ended only after the FBI shifted its publicity campaign toward Greg, hoping someone would recognize her instead. One observant neighbor made the call that solved one of the Bureau's longest-running fugitive cases. Sometimes the safest place to hide isn't somewhere remote. It's somewhere nobody thinks to look. 21. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the drug lord who could not stay hidden forever. For years, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman built one of the world's most powerful drug trafficking organizations while repeatedly escaping capture. After slipping out of a Mexican prison in 2001, he remained a fugitive for more than 13 years, despite being hunted by Mexican authorities with support from the FBI and other U.S. agencies. Guzman relied on an enormous support network. Safe houses, encrypted communications, loyal associates, and sophisticated tunnel systems allowed him to move quickly whenever security forces closed in. On several occasions, investigators came within minutes of capturing him, only to discover he had escaped through hidden passages beneath buildings. He was finally arrested in 2014, escaped again through an elaborate tunnel dug beneath his prison cell in 2015, and was recaptured in January 2016 after months of intensive searching. Ironically, investigators later revealed that his desire to communicate with actors and filmmakers interested in making a movie about his life helped generate valuable leads. One of the world's most elusive fugitives ultimately made himself easier to find by enjoying the spotlight a little too much. Even the most carefully planned escape can unravel when ego gets involved. 22. Daniel Andreas Sandiego. 20 years later, Wales answered the phone. Daniel Andreas Sandiego became wanted after the 2003 bombings of two companies in the San Francisco Bay Area. The FBI said the attacks targeted businesses connected to animal testing, and in 2009 he became the first domestic terrorism suspect added to the FBI's most wanted terrorists list. Then he vanished for more than 20 years. Not 2 weeks, not one bad summer, 20 years, long enough for phones to become smart, cars to become computers, and everyone's knees to start making sound effects. Investigators believed he had changed his identity and stayed away from attention. The case finally moved in November 2024 when authorities arrested him in North Wales, where he had reportedly been living under another name. After 2 decades of wanted posters, international cooperation, and dead-end leads, the ending came in a quiet rural area. Not exactly the movie trailer version. More like a reminder that hiding may delay justice, but it does not erase the file. 23. Jason Derek Brown, the surfer-looking fugitive who still hasn't been found. Jason Derek Brown is wanted in connection with the 2004 murder and armed robbery of armored car guard Robert Keith Palomares outside a movie theater in Phoenix, Arizona. According to the FBI, Brown allegedly shot the guard and fled with the money. Then he disappeared, leaving investigators with a frustrating problem. He did not look like the public's cartoon idea of a fugitive. Brown had a clean-cut, easygoing appearance, and was often described as someone who could blend into crowds without setting off alarms. That is a nightmare for law enforcement. You are not searching for a shadowy villain in a black hat. You are searching for a guy who might look like he is late for a golf lesson. Brown was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in 2007 and later removed in 2022, but he remains wanted. The case is still open, which means this story does not end with handcuffs. It ends with one very uncomfortable question. Where did he go? 24. Andrew Cunanan, the manhunt that moved too slowly. Andrew Cunanan became the subject of a nationwide manhunt in 1997 after a series of killings that crossed several states. The FBI added him to the 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list on June 12, 1997. But the case became even more infamous after he murdered fashion designer Gianni Versace in Miami Beach on July 15th. That detail still feels almost impossible. He was already one of the most wanted men in America, and yet he was still able to move through public places. The problem was not that nobody cared. The problem was that Cunanan traveled quickly, used stolen vehicles, and slipped between jurisdictions before the internet made every gas station camera part of the national nervous system. His run ended days after Versace's murder, when he was found dead in a houseboat in North Miami Beach. It was not the clean ending investigators wanted. It was messy, frustrating, and full of missed chances, the kind of case that made law enforcement rethink how fast information needed to move. 25. Warren Jeffs, caught. Because of a license plate, Warren Jeffs was not hiding in a jungle or tunneling under a prison. He was moving around the American West while wanted on charges connected to sexual conduct involving minors. The FBI placed him on the 10 most wanted fugitives list, and his case drew national attention because he was the leader of the fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For months, investigators searched for him while he avoided arrest and relied on loyal followers and secrecy. Then came the kind of ending that proves reality has a strange sense of humor. On August 28, 2006, Jeffs was arrested near Las Vegas after a Nevada Highway Patrol trooper stopped the vehicle he was riding in because it did not have valid license plates. That's it. Not a dramatic raid, not a secret informant with a coded message. A traffic stop. One of the FBI's most wanted fugitives was taken down by the same kind of small mistake that gets regular people a ticket outside a grocery store. 26. Semyon Mogilevich, the fugitive protected by geography. Semyon Mogilevich is one of the most unusual names connected to FBI wanted history because his case is less about hiding in a cabin and more about international limits. The FBI has wanted him for alleged crimes including fraud, racketeering conspiracy, money laundering, and securities violations. In 2022, the FBI and U.S. State Department announced a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to his arrest or conviction, connected to an alleged scheme that defrauded investors of more than $150 million. But Mogilevich has not been brought to the United States to face those charges. Why? Because international law enforcement is not a magic wand. Borders matter. Extradition agreements matter. Political reality matters. You can have a wanted poster, a reward, and a mountain of allegations, but if the person is in a place where arrest and extradition are unlikely, the chase becomes a diplomatic chess game. It is crime fighting with paperwork, passports, and a lot of frustration. 27. Osama bin Laden, the most wanted man in the world. Osama bin Laden was one of the most hunted fugitives in modern history. The FBI connected him to major terrorist attacks, including the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings in East Africa. And after September 11, 2001, the search became a global mission involving intelligence agencies, military operations, informants, analysts, and years of patient tracking. For nearly a decade after 9/11, bin Laden avoided capture while investigators worked through fragments of information, false leads, courier networks, and the enormous challenge of finding one man protected by loyal supporters. The breakthrough eventually came through intelligence work focused on a trusted courier. That trail led to a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. On May 2, 2011, U.S. forces killed bin Laden during a targeted operation. It was not a lucky traffic stop or a neighbor recognizing a face from television. It was years of pressure, analysis, and persistence. The lesson is simple. Some fugitives are not caught quickly, but time does not mean the search has stopped. So, who hid best and who got caught in the dumbest way?